This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bonini, and these are your headlines. A senior official guns down a motorist in broad daylight. The cult of Culin is accused of using children to gain access to its compound. And a military officer causes a prolonged armed siege on the Thai border. But firstly, our headline story. A man was gunned down and left for dead in the streets of the capital. This shooting was not late at night, but in the middle of the day. After the shooting, the suspect sped off in his car, and when it was revealed that the gunman was in fact a high-ranking military official, disbelief turned into widespread anger. A high-ranking military official who shot a man dead in Phnom Penh was sent to court this week. The suspect, Sao Sakon, a lieutenant colonel, shot and killed the young man at 1 p.m. right in the heart of the capital. He then fled the scene, but was arrested later by police. The suspect confessed to the killing, and his story of what happened that fateful day is rather murky. The suspect claimed that he thought that the victim was a thief because the victim had bumped into his vehicle with his motto, and then he says that the victim had acted in a suspicious manner. Now, as to what this suspicious behaviour was, is currently unknown. The lieutenant colonel said after seeing this suspicious activity, he admitted that he had shouted at the motorcyclist, but the motto driver had not stopped, so the military officer pulled his gun and shot the man dead in broad daylight. In front of many horrified onlookers, the victim died where he fell. The suspect is in custody, and the penalty he faces for the death, according to Article 207 of the Penal Code for involuntary manslaughter, it is punishable by a maximum of 3 years in prison and a maximum fine of 6 million riel. That is just $1,500. The cult at Culin Mountain is still active, and local officials are saying that parents are abandoning children deliberately at the Doomsday Farm, so as they may use them to be able to gain access to and from the compound. But local authorities have a very different idea. The Doomsday cult of Culin has over 200 children in it, and followers are said to be using those children as a ploy to re-enter the LDP cult farm. The local police chief has said, "Some parents think that they can use their children as an excuse to return to the farmstead. This is not the case, as officials will not let them re-enter." He noted that if parents return, they may take their children back home, and the authorities will escort them to collect the kids, but they are not allowed to stay. The LDP has been severely criticised, as they have been accused of exploiting the children physically and as well as the mental well-being of the children by doing repetitive, unnecessary tasks. And this kind of behaviour is a classic procedure straight out of the How to Run a Cult playbook. Allow me to explain. You see, in a cult, the aim is always complete obedience, to break down all free will of its members, and to get that group to act without questioning. This is achieved by firstly creating a common enemy, replacing all authority with a single leader, who has often supernatural abilities, just as this guy does. And then it is to erode the free will of its members. And I feel this is proven by the statement of one of the cult members, who said that her child should never leave the compound, as it now thinks in a political way, and would not be able to socialize with other children. It could only now possibly socialize with those within the cult. Now that is absolutely textbook definition of how a cult works, when a child is brainwashed into no longer being a child. And it's harder to think of any worse criminal act than the theft of a kid's childhood. A group of Cambodian soldiers, including a colonel of the Cambodian Army, have been arrested after they crossed into Thailand. The colonel brandished his weapon at Thai officials, and the incident could have easily escalated into a firefight. This, unsurprisingly, has caused acute embarrassment, as well as creating a serious diplomatic incident. According to a Thai report, the group was headed by a colonel in the Cambodian Army, and they had left Cambodia earlier this week to visit Thailand. The men were armed with pistols, and they had failed to stop on the request of the Thai authorities, but they were finally detained with the intervention of Thai military. This is a stunning breach of diplomatic protocol. It is said that the Cambodians had driven through a checkpoint to search for illegal goods, but they had failed to stop. The leader of the group was named by Thai media as Sok Bonpal, a 30-year-old military officer in the Ministry of National Defense. The incident escalated when the leader of the group, the colonel, is reported to have pulled out a handgun and pointed it at Thai officials. He then had to be subdued by Thai military forces. In doing so, the colonel has single-handedly created one of the most high-profile and embarrassing diplomatic incidents in many a long year. His actions of brandishing a loaded weapon at an international border and pointing it at armed military personnel of a neighbouring country is being considered an outrage by both sides. He has only one thing, though, to be grateful for, and that is the Thai military maintained discipline and thankfully did not open fire. There has been an update on this story, and what occurred is even more astonishing than originally thought. It seems that the army colonel involved in the incident was threatening the armed forces of Thailand for an incredible 17 hours, refusing to relinquish his weapon, even though he had numerous marksmen pointing high-caliber rifles directly at him. When finally subdued by force, the reason he gave for this bizarre incident was he had had an argument with his wife. He would say no more than that. He really was exceedingly lucky that the Thai army kept their cool. An encouraging medical milestone has been reached. Cambodia is no longer in the World Health Organization's top 30 nations with high TB rates, and the progression they are making is exceedingly encouraging to further reduce infections nationwide. In an interview with the Khmer Times, the World Health Organization representative, Dr. Lee Alan, said that the kingdom has made a great achievement in TB prevention and control over the past few years. But the disease remains endemic within the country, with the biggest risk being to young children. And globally, TB is a very serious issue, with 1.6 million people dying from TB in 2021 globally. And TB is the 13th leading cause of death, and over 10 million people a year fall ill, and nearly 2 million of those are children. The biggest irony is it need not happen, as TB is both curable and preventable. Dr. Adian said, "It is very hard to determine the exact number of childhood TB cases within Cambodia, but we do know that in 2021 over 5,000 childhood cases were treated. The battle against TB is certainly being won, but the war is far from over." City Hall has announced the full extent of traffic restrictions during the ASEAN summit in Phnom Penh. So if you live in the capital, here are the highlights as to what the lockdown is going to do. And they are quite extensive. Phnom Penh Capital Administration has announced the full list of streets and areas undergoing traffic restrictions during the forthcoming ASEAN summit that is to visit the capital, and will continue all weekend at the Soka Hotel. So here's your first tip: stay well away from the area of the hotel. And other restrictions have been announced. Here are some of those restrictions. Firstly, vehicles that enter Phnom Penh via Russian Federation Boulevard must divert to Chom Chau Overpass. Secondly, vehicles that travel across Norodom Boulevard must divert to Street 63. Also, vehicles entering the capital from National Road 6 must now go via Win Win Boulevard, and vehicles travelling on Street 70 roundabout must divert to 169. Also of note, the Soka ferry has been suspended. But here's the big one, and that is the flying of kites has also been suspended, and worse of luck for me, since I just purchased one on a whim from Khmer 440, sand barges are not allowed to travel along Tonle Sap River. So no sand barge fun for me this weekend. The truth is, the capital will be very severely affected by traffic backups, not just from the central area where the conferences are taking place, but it will also spread throughout the city. The best thing that you can do is not to travel unless it's absolutely necessary in those orders, as the restrictions are not only for short periods, but can also be for extended lengths of time. And this, I'm sure, is going to lead to traffic gridlock. And now it's time to look at our sports news. Here is one of those wonderful oddities in sport. In the Argentinian Junior Championship final, 10 players were sent off. The game was so heated it turned into a slugfest. And the winner was declared to be the Racing Club because Boca Juniors had only 6 players left on the pitch. 7 of the Boca players had been dismissed, including 2 from the bench. Rules state a match cannot continue if a team has fewer than 7 players. So the game ended and RC were declared the champions. What a game that was! And now to our champions that lay in the Premier League. Here are those results, and if we look in the top left corner, we see our adopted team, Nottingham Forest, scored 2 goals. But unfortunately, so did Brentford, so only 1 point for them. Man U continued their appalling run, losing 3-1 at Aston Villa, but the real scrap went on at Chelsea, where Arsenal went to visit, scored a single goal, and took all 3 points. Now, let's glance over at the Premier League table itself, and there is Arsenal sitting comfortably at the top after yet another win. They're playing superbly. Man United have actually scraped into 5th place, and that's because so many teams below them also failed. Crystal Palace, that valuable point, it holds them at 10th place. It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week. And here is the forecast. The temperatures will be in the early 30s. The humidity still sitting about the 60% mark. But it really is a mixed bag. As we come out of the weekend, we've got the threat of thunder and lightning all over again. It looks like the storms are returning. And as we progress deeper into the week, it's only going to get worse. This has been the Khmer Times News. You can contact myself at the studio by mailing us at ktnewsstudio@gmail.com. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next Saturday for your weekly roundup.